Hey there, estate planning attorney Paul here again, and in this video we're going to talk about when and how you should review the estate planning program that you may have put in place years ago. Okay, so here's the deal. Once you establish, I call it a program, an estate planning program, you put your legal affairs in order, you can't necessarily just set it and forget it. It's not necessarily a one-shot deal. These things need monitoring, review, and on occasion, kind of update and modification. So first question I'll go over is, how often should you review things? Well, in general, if your family circumstances change frequently, and I'll define that in a minute, then you should review things often, which also I'll define in a minute. If you don't have any kind of change in your family circumstances over the years, then your estate plan likely needs less review. Now, what is often? I would say people who are having all these major changes in family circumstances often, and perhaps they even have estate tax consequences to their estate. Really people who are aggressively monitoring their whole estate planning program, may be taking a look at things once a year. But that's not typical. I would say on the other end of the spectrum, perhaps every 5 years reviewing things for many is appropriate. And quite frankly, for some, whether they do it every 3 years or 5 years, I'm not even mentioning that they have to meet with a lawyer, every 3 years. They just need to review the kinds of decisions that I'm going to go over throughout this video and make sure nothing warrants a change. Now, when I say there's a change in family circumstances that would warrant a review, what does that mean? Well, it means things like if you got married, if you got divorced, if someone who will play a role or be an heir to you has passed away. Maybe you changed your mind about either how you want to leave things or who you want to designate certain things. Maybe there's estate tax consequences that might warrant an annual review and annual actions such as annual gifting. Maybe you move to another state and these things, each state has their own particular rules, and sometimes when someone moves to another state with the expectation that they'll live the rest of their lifetime in that state, it at least warrants a review to make sure there's not some state nuance that would warrant updating things that you had done in the previous state. And while I kind of hate to admit it, if you get sick, if you get diagnosed with, again, I hate to say it, some kind of terminal illness, well, it's obviously an appropriate time to review what you've done, one final review to make sure things are going to go just like you'd want them to go. So those are the circumstances where anytime, those things happen, it probably warrants, let's take a look at what we've got and make sure we're still on track. Now, there's also other circumstances that may warrant a review. Maybe your priorities, your estate planning priorities have changed. Maybe, we'll see people and we'll set things up when they're, I'll call it, 57 years old. And now they're 66 years old and they've had some medical issues that have caused them to worry about things like how they can protect their estate if they have to go into a nursing home. So that's a circumstance where someone's priorities have changed. Maybe someone has concerns about kind of lawsuit or asset protection. They've seen some things out there. Again, we did some things for them when they were 50. Now, based on their profession or some situation they're involved in, they're worried about a future liability. So that becomes a change in their priorities. Or maybe when we did this for someone in their mid-30s or when they were 40, they were most concerned about designating who would raise their children if the parents passed away before the children reached the age of majority. Now, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later, the kids are all grown up. The priorities move to, how do we avoid probate perhaps and make things easy for each other and for our children. So people's priorities do change, and sometimes that warrants a review, and in many cases warrants a change. Now, when you review, what do you review? So let's go through maybe a few items that, and much of this you can do really on your own. And I say that because I've had so many meetings and where that some of which have resulted, I call it quite frankly, a waste of time. I did something for someone, 8 years ago. They come in, they haven't looked at, they call the office, I want a review meeting. Somehow it gets, they wind up, we schedule an hour, they come in, they bring in their portfolio of legal documents. They're like, Paul, we haven't looked at this in 8 years. But we were told that we need to review things, so let's review it. And their circumstances haven't changed. Married couple, 2 kids. They want to give everything to the 2 kids 50-50. Kids are responsible. And so we just have to sit there and kind of go through things because they won't look at it outside of my presence. And so my point here is there are some things you can and should look at. I know as time passes, as years pass along, you may quite frankly forget some of the designations that you made, and so it's a good idea for you personally on your own to review these things. Here's some of the things that you would review. Obviously, look at who the heirs or beneficiaries are. Perhaps you have heirs listed in your will, and so you want to look at what you did. Did you leave everything to your 3 children equally? Did you make any specific bequests to individuals or charities or other relatives? Do those still make sense? The residuary or what you left after the specific bequests, is that going to, like I said before, your children equally? Are your grandchildren involved in any of that? Do you want your grandchildren involved in any of that? And then if you have, so many people these days have living trusts in order to avoid probate, you want to look at that. And that you want to look at who are the, in a will we call it heirs, in particular here in my state we call it legatees. And in a trust, we call it principal beneficiaries. Who's going to receive the trust assets when you die? Same analysis. Is it going to be your children equally? Did you name certain specific amounts for specific people, grandchildren, the whole issue there? Look at that. And then also, even though this isn't necessarily part of your legal documents, you want to go back and revisit all of your beneficiary designations on things like your IRAs and your life insurance, and if you own annuities. The idea there is make sure you have both primary and contingent beneficiaries listed the right way. And if you need help with that, that might be something that you'd want to contact your attorney to work with, perhaps your financial advisor if you have one, to make sure all those beneficiary designations are structured the right way. What you also want to take a look at is all of the appointments that you made, and you made a bunch of them. So again, if you have a will, you'll name your executor. Also take a look at who's the alternate executor. If you're married, you probably named your spouse as your executor, and then maybe an adult child or children as the alternate executor or co-executors. Take a look at all of that. Again, if you've set up any trusts, look at the trustee designations. Who will be the trustee? If that trust is going to last for many, many decades, even perhaps after you pass away, want to look at those successor trustees as well. Also going to want to take a look at who you designated as what we call your agent in your power of attorney. Now that's only going to be effective during your lifetime, but still an important designation. Who can do things for you if you're incapacitated and you're not able to do things like pay your bills, deal with your IRA accounts, request medical records from your doctor. Again, if you're married, many people appoint their spouse first, an adult child or children as the backups, but you can appoint anybody that you want to. So take a look at those and make sure those are still in accordance with what your wishes are. Another thing to look at is how your assets are titled. I mentioned earlier, a lot of people out there have living trusts, and it becomes important for those probate assets. Maybe you've acquired some assets since you created your trust and you forgot that you should have acquired them in the name of your trust. So you want to look at those probate assets like real estate, business interests, LLCs, S corporations, partnerships, investment accounts that are not IRAs. You want to look at all that and make sure that what needs to be titled in the trust is titled in the trust. Some people, again, as they age and decades pass after they create their estate planning program, their priorities change. So you want to make sure if future Medicaid eligibility is important to you, you want to make sure assets are titled the right way. Also, if you have kind of more net worth than most and the potential for estate tax is there, how your assets are titled can have impact on the estate tax ramifications when you pass away. And then some, all those non-probate assets as well. How's your life insurance ownership structured? And other, kind of probate and non-probate assets. Making sure assets are titled the right way is important. Some people, even before they come to the lawyer the first time, they go to the bank. And it seems like just about everybody out there, those parents who are getting up in age, they seem to all want to go to the bank and add their perhaps responsible child as having signature authority on their bank account. A lot of people do that, and a lot of people want to do that. And so if that's something that you feel is necessary or important, is all that taken care of? Vehicle titles, people ask me all the time, Paul, I'm 70 years old, I'm about to go buy a new car, how should I title it? And that kind of as a joke, I say title it in the name of the last spouse to die. A lot of people think they're making it easy, at least in our state of Louisiana, by John and Mary Smith. They're 80 years old, they're buying a new car, they're like, we'll just put it in both of our names. And that way if one of us dies, the survivor can trade it in or sell it. That's not the case. So there's just people kind of play that game a little bit. So all that is out there as part of the review that you can even look at prior to talking to the attorney. Again, if there's estate tax, but we have an $11.58 million exemption now, scheduled though to come back in 2026 to about $6 million per estate. A lot of you people watching this video will still be around in 2026. So, we need to look at that and see whether any kind of estate tax avoidance planning is necessary, and that usually starts with some annual gifting if that's necessary and if that's desired. And then in addition to all of those things that you look at, another factor is, is everything organized for ease of access? So do you have just a stack of crumpled up, folded up, stuffed in envelopes, legal documents? You got the ones you did 4 years ago. They're mixed up with the ones that you did 17 years ago. And those are mixed up with the ones you did 25 years ago when your kids were minors. Or is there, an organized structure to everything, not only with organization with the legal documents, but also organization with what you own, where all of your important papers are, who would need to be contacted in the event of your passing away. All of those things, if you can organize that. We do it in our office with our organized and tabbed estate planning portfolio, but that also is a really key part of making things easy in the future for your survivors. So that's what the review looks like, and I'll leave it to you after you review this video whether you think it's necessary to actually contact an estate planning attorney and to assist you with this if you feel like some modification may need to be discussed or take place. So that's the deal with the how often and how you do it. Stay tuned to my channel, like button, subscribe, notification bell. You won't miss anything. We'll see you next time.